systems about 6 or 7 years ago when they were fairly new. Saw them at a NIMSY symposium in the vendor hall, started playing with them and figured out that this had a cool capability, better than any rhythm generator we had at the time, just being able to do a bunch of different stuff, and figured out it was going to be pretty, thought it could be a pretty good tool. Went back, found funding, bought 2 of them that year, and used them for a year in our program. And after 1 year using them, went back and bought 3 more of them. So we've had 5 of them, and that was the ALSI, which was the predecessor to this current system. And just about a year ago at RCC, we upgraded to the ALS, or to the reality system, which is what the new version is. And I'm just absolutely sold on them. I have a really easy time doing promos and stuff for these guys because I think it's an amazing product, and hopefully you'll see the benefit in it because you guys are going to have them soon. So what I'm going to do is try and go over just kind of some basics of the functionality, and like any of the high fidelity simulators, anything that's got a control pad, there's layers within layers within layers, so that if you want to spend the time, you can spend hours in there finding things it can do, adding features, doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to try to hit all of that stuff, but I'll try to at least hit some of the highlights. Especially what I like about it is I've got about 20 plus part-time EMS instructors, and I can take someone within about 15 to 20 minutes, have someone running this thing on the fly and pretty comfortable just navigating, changing things, doing stuff. If you want to get where you can build scenarios, program in stuff, predictable changes, do all that, that takes a little bit more time and effort. But if you just want to pull it up and run it on the fly, it's actually really, really simple to do. You need like a little holder for that.
I know, I do. I don't have mine. A selfie stick or something.
I'll hold it for you.
Oh, that's good. I can zoom in and move
See if
around.
if that angle will work.
No, it's too tall.
I tried.
This is good.
All right. So basically the system, has anybody used the Reality or the ALSI or anything? Okay, so a couple of you have at least seen or played with it. So basically, to kind of simplify the explanation of it, the system is 3 iPads and a router. That's the system. And did you get the 4 iPads with each one or 3? Do you know?
I told Chris to give me whatever Gary had.
You got 3. Okay, cool. That should get you out. And knowing Chris, he might have thrown in the 4th one. I don't know. So my buddy Chris, who is their national clinical education manager, has been working with these guys since they first started rolling these out. He's awesome to work with and does a lot of the training related to it also. Anyway, so the idea is, and I'll explain in a minute kind of how you can bring in a 4th iPad. But basically, you've got 3 iPads and you've got a router. And this is kind of the old style router, which is in my demo kit. The stuff they give me to go show people is not as nice as the newer stuff. This is the newer one. It's a little bigger, a little bulkier, has extra outputs and all that. Basically, we don't use it much. I have it plugged into the wall because what I've found, and I've got 2 kits here. This is the demo kit that they send me with, which is the previous version. This is the one that you guys will be getting. And one of the things that they do in the bigger version is inside the bag is a battery pack. And so with this particular battery pack, which is turned off right now, I've got, if I turn it on, it'll have these 2 little USB ports, which can power the iPads if you want. The main thing is it's got a little switch that you turn on. When the light comes on, now it's powering the outlet. So I can plug the router into that. And now the entire thing is mobile. And that's really nice if you're going to be moving around. So we'll do a lot of scenarios where we start outside and then move to the ambulance and then move somewhere else and do a handoff report. And the router is in the bag with the students the whole way. You don't have to worry about it. But because you're running off of a battery pack, for whatever reason, if you're doing this over the course of a day, it'll pulse, you start sucking down some of the energy. And it seems like running off the battery, it's more often that the router has issues and doesn't stay connected, or something will happen occasionally. So if you're going to be in a classroom, or just going from this classroom to that classroom, somewhere where you're still going to be within range of the router, I usually just plug it in and leave it plugged into the wall. So you can do it either way.
What's the range on the router?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know part of the reason they went to the bigger one is because it has a better range, but I don't know what the range is on it. I mean, I know we've done it where we've been, had the router plugged inside and gone outside of the building to the ambulance, and it was still working there. It wasn't until we drove away that we realized that the router was still inside the building, to somewhere in there disconnected. But at least it would go from inside our building to just outside and through a little bit of wall. But I don't know how reliable that is. So what the system is made up of is the iPads. So you have 3 iPads that are all communicating through that router. They can communicate through any router. You do not want to set them up so they're communicating through your college Wi-Fi, however, especially if it's anything like our college Wi-Fi, because that's problematic because it's competing with a lot of other things, which is why it comes packaged with its own router. So one of the things you do when you're first setting it up that's helpful is if you go into the settings on each iPad, and if you're an iPad user and you're comfortable with those settings, this is going to be really redundant for anybody who doesn't use iPads a lot. I'll just go through it real quick. You got to check the Wi-Fi, and this one says it's looking at the iSimulate Blue station, which is how I have that one labeled. What they'll probably do on yours, the same they did for ours, is each of these bags comes with a little tag on it. This one says navy, orange, green, whatever, and that way each bag you can glance at it and figure out which one it is. Because if you've got multiples of these, you need to make sure that the controller you're using is talking to the right device and not to the one in the next room. But if you make sure that all 3 of them are looking at that, I always have to go through periodically, switch the router, go to the internet so that I can update the software, make sure everything's current, even just the iOS software. But then I always go in and tell it to forget that network. And as long as you tell it to forget the other networks, by default, each time I open them, these 3 will look at the router that's in this bag, unless you go in and tell it to do something different. So once you get all your sets kind of configured, they should all just pretty much do it. But if something's not working, that's the first thing to check, is make sure they're all looking at the same router.
A different router for each bag?
For each bag. Each bag comes with its own router, its own battery pack. And the battery pack that I saw at whichever conference, I think it was at the NAMSI, the last place I saw iSimulate had a booth, they have a new battery now that supposedly has a longer battery life and is half the size of this one. So the pack you guys are getting may have a much smaller battery. It may not be the same router. They're continuously sort of tweaking and upgrading stuff as it comes out. And these guys have a pretty good deal with Apple and purchasing, because they literally buy iPads by the pallet. So they kind of have a good purchasing system in place. So once you've made sure they're all looking at the same router, and I let this one turn off, so you start the monitor first, and the monitor piece, the monitor iPad, is the heart of the system. It's an iPad Pro, because you have to have an iPad Pro to handle the complexity of the software. That's where the licensed software sits, is on that. You can actually add the other software for the camera or this to any iPad, and it's free. So you can download additional copies of this. A couple of my instructors have the facilitator software on their own iPads, so they can take them home and build scenarios. You can't see what the scenarios are going to look like until you hook it up to one of these, but you can build scenarios and you can share them with other devices and that kind of thing, which is pretty handy. So once this is there, all of the reality is the little orange circle. So if you start this on the demo pack first, you can set it up to come up in a number of different ways, and I've got this one configured so it comes up here where you can, if this is your startup, you can start by telling it what monitor you want to pick. What I've got all mine set up with, I would recommend, is you bring it up and in the monitor screen, which is called staging on here, and it just comes up and it says connect the control pad. That way you're going to, from your control pad, make all the decisions about what monitor, the student information, anything you're going to do. And once that's turned on, I do the same little orange thing here. I have this one set. You just go into the settings on the iPad and tell it always come up in the control mode. If I don't set that, it comes up with 3 choices, which is control, camera, or chart. This one's just set up to come up as the control unit. I say tap to connect. It finds the thing that's called Gary Heigel's demo, which is what I named this. And then I hit connect, and now I'm connected to that monitor. Next thing I do, it's got this screen, and this is where I have scenarios. You can have folders within folders of scenarios in here that are pre-programmed if you want, or you can just start it on the fly. I would suggest that you create scenarios to start from, because if you try to just pick a monitor, start entering things, and then you stop it and go to start it again, sometimes you lose those settings. if you go in, what I've done on the RCC ones, what I'm going to do before the start of class on the RCC ones, I haven't done that since we just updated the software, is I go in and I have one that's just a generic RCC startup. So all my instructors know if you go to that one, you'll get normal vital signs, a sinus rhythm, a pulse ox at 96%. You just have a normal, healthy patient. You start from there, and then you can dial in whatever you want to do and where you want to go with it. But at least there's one where it's just kind of a generic startup screen. When you get it, it will probably come loaded with a bunch of their demo scenarios. I would suggest deleting all that crap off of there because it's intended to show you all the different monitors it can go through, and it actually gets more confusing than it is helpful sometimes. I want to be recorded, aren't I? Anyway, so from the startup screen, you can enter a student name. You don't have to, but if you're going to do review, if you're going to download video, if you're going to share video with a student, you can capture it here, and I'll just put some initials in there just to do it. So I have a student name, and then I can pick a scenario. So we will, let's see, I'll just pick a demo scenario. So I picked a scenario, and it's going to come up with one where I've got some events already programmed in here. If I want to record the scenario that I'm doing, then I go to my camera. Again, this one is set so it opens automatically in the camera mode. And as soon as it does, it asks me, what do I want to connect to? And again, I connect to this monitor. And as soon as I connect, it pops up on your control, says, do you want to record this scenario? It won't record unless you say yes, you want to. And if you say yes, it's now ready to record, and it's going to start recording as soon as I hit the start button. Everybody with me so far?
Start button.
And start button's right down here. So I apologize for it being small. That's why I was hoping I could project it up there so you could see the controls a little better. So start button's flashing yellow here down at the bottom. And you hit the start button, and you'll notice that I've got a bunch of parameters set here. And down the side on the left is where I can set events. And that's just their terminology. So this whole thing is a scenario. Down the side are events. And so I have an event that's called initial. I have an event that I labeled dyspnea just to demonstrate that, one that's cardiac arrest. So you can label it however you want. And when you create those events, you can set all the parameters that you want for it. Vital signs, waveforms, everything for that event. And it's going to follow that. What's in the middle here, you've got 4 squares: heart rate, SpO2, end-tidal CO2, and blood pressure. Each one of those can be controlled sort of separately. And the first control you want to notice is at the bottom right corner, there's a little eyeball. And the eyeball means you can see it. If it's grayed out, nobody can see it on the monitor because they haven't hooked up anything yet. If it's blue, it means it's visible. So I start out all my scenarios with everything hidden. So when the student comes in, right now you see nothing because they haven't turned it on. So they got to find, if you're using a Zoll, you got to find the power button where it is on a Zoll. And it comes up. Now their monitor is turned on, ready to go, but they don't get any values until they actually approach it the way they would. And so if they want to do pulse ox, then, oh, you're going to be my patient? Or my partner? There we go. So you pull out pulse ox, and as soon as your student hooks up the pulse ox, they get it on the finger, then you can kind of pay attention, and the minute you do, they're going to see a waveform and a value to go with that pulse ox binding. The other thing that I like about this one versus the previous version, the other one, if you didn't want that annoying beep going on, you had to turn it off. You had to find the volume button on that iPad. Now they put a little sound controller, and you can either slide the volume down, you can turn off the heart rate, you can turn off the alarms, so you as the facilitator can decide whether or not you want to hear that, whether or not you want to give them an alert so that they notice that their patient just coded, whatever. So that's in your control as well.
Can a student do that from their monitor to turn off their alarms?
They can do it exactly the way they would on that monitor. So if they're familiar with the Zoll, which I'm not as much, if they want to go to the, I think it's up there. Yeah, so if it's alarming, right now that was just the heart rate one, but if an alert goes on and they hit the alarms button, it'll toggle the alarm on and off just like it would. And that's what's cool about this. Just in the last year, they started out with all the kind of upfront obvious buttons working, but a lot of the deeper level stuff on the monitors didn't actually simulate exactly. Now, almost every button you go to will behave exactly the way it would on that monitor. And I say almost, that's tough with the Zoll because every person who has a Zoll can customize every one of those menu options. So if you work for one of those agencies that went in and tweaked every single setting, the generic Zoll settings for some of those inside menus may or may not be exactly the same. But it's pretty darn close. People can navigate it the way they would on their device. So if they pull out their ECGs, and so what we do, the package, it comes a variety of ways. I actually, on our bags, changed where stuff was just to make it more logical to my brain, but there's ECG cables. It comes with a 3-lead unless you specify that you want a 4-lead. In our area, everybody uses a 4-lead as the initial. Apparently on the East Coast, everybody uses a 3-lead, so that's the way these all come packaged out in New York, but you can get it either way. Once they hook that up to the patient, you just hit the eyeball, and now they're going to see their ECG tracing. Okay? Same with your capnography. They have to hook up, and on a life pack, you turn on the capnography, they see it. On a Zoll, you put on the capnography, you have to tell it you actually want to watch it, and then it'll come on. So just like the Zoll X series, you have to actually push the capnography button if you want to see it. And so all that stuff is there. The blood pressure, there's an option. It doesn't have an eyeball here, because if you want, you can go into the settings and have them show a continuous blood pressure if you've got a patient on an art line or something. Otherwise, you get a blood pressure the way you would do it in the field by hitting that, and what? Oh, there it goes. So it makes the appropriate noise. The blood pressure cuff is right here on the side. They have to pull it out, they have to hook it up. But of course, it's just a tubing tied to a bag. It's not really going to inflate anything. It's an iPad. So there's no inflation happening. But it makes the right sound. It takes the appropriate amount of time. They don't just wave a blood pressure cuff over the patient, look at you and say, what's my blood pressure, and get it in 3 seconds. They have to figure out that, oh, I put that on, hit the button, I can go do some other stuff because I got some time. You know, that whole timing sequence and the flow of calls, it's going to happen in the time frame it normally does, and as soon as it's finished, it'll pop up with a vital sign. With each of these, in these 4 center things, all the controls are done with a dial. So you can see, hopefully you can see, I grabbed the little orange thing and I can spin this up to 160 on the heart rate, and we're at what, 87 now. So I have 2 choices. I can say, okay, they just did something, scared this patient. Right now I hit send and it just jumped to 167 instantly. Okay, real patients don't really do that typically unless you're making a rhythm change, right? So what you can do instead is say, okay, I want it to go back down to 80 because you just calmed your patient down. But down here there's a little thing that says now with a plus or minus. I don't want it to do it right now. I want to do it over 30 seconds. And then I hit send. And there's a little blue line you might be able to see going around on this that shows me the progress of where it is between the 170 and the 80 that I'm sending it to and how long it's going to take to get there. So really cool, because you can also, on these little events, you can pre-program events that also have a trend time in it. So say you got a scenario with anaphylaxis and you're hoping they're going to give epi. You can have an event that says epi administration, and you want the respiratory rate to come down this much over this amount of time. You want the bronchospasm to go away over this amount of time. You want these, you set these changes, and I want it to happen over 3 minutes. The minute they push the epi, you hit that button and it just does all the changes for you. Or the next box down can be failed to administer epi, and the heart rate can go up, the respirations can get worse, they can go into cardiac arrest over whatever period of time. So you can set it up to automatically trend wherever you want it to go, which is also kind of slick. The waveforms, so the dials on all of them, that's how you control. Blood pressure, you can just dial up and down. Capnography, and there's a little toggle switch. So respiratory rate and the CO2 are on the same little dial. You just have to toggle which one you're changing, which trips everybody up for a while because you think you're changing the end-tidal CO2 and instead you're making the respiratory rate 48. But as long as you pay attention, the dials is what affects the change, and as soon as you've made a change, you hit send to send it to the monitor, and then they see it. The event things, each box is an event. When you hit that button, all of that stuff happens right now, unless you set the event to be something that transitions in over time. Does that make sense? Okay. The other thing is each box has a little circle in the center of it that has, except for the blood pressure, that has a waveform. So for ECG, you go in here, and it's blank right now, and you guys probably can't see it, but there's a list of waveforms. You have categories: sinus, cardiac arrest, atrial abnormalities, ventricular, conduction abnormalities, ischemia, myopathies, electrolytes and drugs, miscellaneous, and pediatric. And they're from Australia, the company that makes this, so they spell things funny. Pediatric has an A in it. Well, it has 2 A's in it, actually. Anyway, so for instance, sinus rhythm, you've got just like 5 to choose from. Cardiac arrest, you have that many rhythms to choose from. Atrial, you've got that many rhythms. I don't even know how many rhythms there are in there. I think it's did they tell you when you were doing it? It's 150 or maybe more than that. So unlike the old rhythm generators, 2 differences. One, there's a lot more rhythms, but the other thing is you can see what they look like before you pick them to decide if that's the one that kind of represents what you're going for. And they've got a whole variety of ischemia. So you've got various ST elevations, MIs, ST depression. Actually, there's not that many in that category specifically. But the conduction abnormalities has all of your different heart blocks as well as some bundle branch blocks, different things. What you'll notice on the ECG, and this is a new addition as of about 6 months ago, is that the earlier edition, the 12 lead was a thing over here. If you wanted to do in a scenario with a 12 lead, you picked from one of a dozen 12 leads. And then you had rhythms. And you would try to match a rhythm that kind of looked like the 12 choices they had. They have now integrated, so I think they're up to 40 or 50 of them where they're connected. And that's like software magic that they've actually doing this. But that means that if I say any of them that have a little 12 symbol in it has a 12 lead available that's linked to that rhythm. So if I pick one of these, bless you. So if I pick the inferior STEMI, I'm going to, let me send that there. So I can get an inferior STEMI, and if right now I decide to do a 12 lead on my Zoll, it'll jump into the 12 lead view, and I see that inferior evidence in all the appropriate leads where it should be. If on the other hand, I'm just in my single lead view and something's going on, I mistreated my patient, whatever, and now my heart rate just jumped to 106, now they're in a tachycardia, and now I go do a 12 lead. Again, it's going to be a 12 lead that reflects that rhythm at the current rate. And to have all that connected up and mirror it instantly it's magic. I mean, it's really cool. So what monitors are being used in this area? Is it mostly Zoll, LifePak, a mix of all those?
Zoll, you guys have Philips.
Philips, we have that one too.
Mostly Zoll.
Okay, so the Zoll, I can just stick with that. But at any point, you can switch monitors from within a scenario and pick from any of the different ones. So we have Philips, a couple of different Philips monitors, a couple Zolls, a variety of them. This one people was like, because if you're using a LifePak, when you do the 12 lead on the LifePak, it, just like it does on a LifePak, you got to dial up the age of your patient first, male or female, and then when you acquire it, it prints it out for you. Which is kind of funny.
How do you rip that off?
And then it pops up. That's the challenge. You're ripping the iPad off is kind of hard. But it does pop it up in a full screen view so they can look at it, decide what it is, and then you just exit out when you're ready to go back to your screen. So that's kind of nice. With the Zoll on the monitor, it doesn't have a way for you to pop up and pause and look at a printed copy, but you've got the 12 leads continuously that you can watch while you're doing whatever. So it's kind of a trade-off there, similar to using it. But I'm sure they're working on that. The other option is low disk space. Lovely. So with any of the 12 leads, you have that capability. And what I started to say is that fourth iPad that you can add in, and you don't have to buy it from them. You can get an iPad. You can add the Reality software to it for free. And then that other option is you can pick Chart. And that becomes sort of a documentation tool. Right now, it's not set up for actual charting, doing your subchart, but I think they're going to build that in eventually. But right now, it's a place you can send a 12 lead, you can send lab values, you can send whatever you built into your scenario to an iPad that one of the team can be holding and looking at separate from the device. So that's the way you tear it off and hand it to them, is you can actually send it to another iPad, but that means adding one more iPad to the mix. Anyway, so that's kind of what you do with that. Pulse ox, you only have 2 waveforms to pick from. You have normal or poor perfusion, but you can change the pleth, so it has a little bit different appearance to it if you want that them to pay attention or notice that, yeah, their number's okay, but that waveform's really not impressive. So it has that, but those are the only 2 choices. And for capnography, you've only got 8 choices currently. So you have normal, you have a little bit of bronchospasm, and it takes just like 2 complexes usually before it kicks in and starts showing it to you. So you can show a little bit, or you can show a really dramatic shark fin. And it's kind of nice because just like I did with the other example, you can give them someone with significant bronchospasm and a rapid respiratory rate and lots of evidence that they're not doing well. If they go down the right path, they provide a breathing treatment, you can dial it back to that partial bronchospasm over 3 minutes or over 10 minutes, whatever, and prompt them to maybe they need to do further treatment. They do more treatment, you take it all the way back to a normal waveform. So you can just tweak it as you go, which is kind of nice. The other thing is that I didn't mention is a few of these boxes have little squares that you can expand. Right next to the dial, there's a little expanding square. On the blood pressure one, you can, as an instructor, there's a NIBP send. So normally, they don't see a blood pressure unless they hook up the cuff and push the button. If something changes, if they checked it but before you meant to change it, or you just want to get their attention, you can hit the NIBP send button and it will pop up the blood pressure on the screen whether they acquired one or not. Just, oh yeah, is it dying?
It is.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop it
Maybe
and delete it. and
yeah,
then start.
yeah. If you want to try and empty out the memory on that one and see, I don't know what's going on. I do these and do over lots and lots of back and forth jumping around. It kind of fries its little brain, I think. So you can do that, and this is where you can also do an arterial line, which doesn't show up on this monitor, but if you're using one of the Philips hospital monitors, something like that, you can have continuous, and within that you've got about 8 waveforms to choose from if you're doing critical care kind of stuff or looking at those values. The other thing in EKG is the other one you can expand, which is really cool, is that with any rhythm that you have, you can add PVCs, PACs, or PJCs, and it's a little plus and minus line. So it used to be, again, if you wanted to give them a rhythm with any kind of ectopy, you picked from the list, and it had either, you had like 4 of them to pick from that had ectopy. Now you can apply ectopy to any and every rhythm in here. So if you want to throw some PVCs, you can have just a couple of them, or you can send a whole bunch of them to them, and they'll start throwing PVCs and couplets and all kinds of stuff. Depending on how far over you slide that little bar will control how much of that ectopy they see. If it's treated, if you decide you want it to change, you just go in and you subtract it out of there again. What's that? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay, so we're going to send that. We got tons of ectopy. So we're on the life pack, so we have to capture it this way. So do that. Write that down. So
Now we're asking the impossible.
ectopy on 12 lead. I'll remember what that means.
I don't even know how to spell that.
ECTOPY. I thought you did. Yeah, so it's a great question. It should, and it probably will with the next update. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. This company is so awesome about responding to user feedback and tweaking things like that. I mean, they really want to make this stuff as realistic as possible.
Switch it to Zoll and try that.
Okay.
On the
Oh yeah, on the Zoll we
screen.
should be able to. So again, there's a little monitor button up here at the top. I can go find the monitor that I want. We'll put it back on the Zoll, and then we'll go to the 12 lead on there. And
Yeah.
well, see, that's all. It is entirely realistic. All you have to do to make ectopy go away is get a 12 lead. It's just poof, it's gone. That's interesting because it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. 'Cause that's the first time that's came up since they that I've been aware of since they added that feature. So I'll have to point that out to them. One more challenge for the programmers. I'm sure they'll love it. Anyway, so let's see. And they've got artifact. So if you want to add electrical artifact, you can. So you can put in a baseline. I might have to. Oh, I didn't give it any amount to it. There's kind of a range of artifact that you can do, and maybe that's not showing up on the 12 lead either. Yeah, so you can throw in all kinds of 60 cycle interference and things like that. So, and again, you can do that on any of the rhythms that they have.
You can change the lead that they're looking at.
You can. So if they want to change leads, they hit the lead button and it'll scroll through. So I just went from 2 to 3, AVR, AVL. Yeah, so you can scroll through all the leads, assuming that they've hooked up all the leads, right? So if they don't, and there's actually an option within the ECG where you can go in, where is it?
If you can change the leads there. It should
Yeah,
be-
there's a 12 lead button where you can go in and click and indicate which leads they're using. So you can also turn on the pads, turn on or off the pads to show that they haven't hooked up pads yet, so pads aren't an option. So if you want, or if they're trying to do a 12 lead and they haven't hooked up the chest leads yet, if you go in and turn off all those chest leads, then they turn on 12 lead, it won't give them anything except the quick 6 that they would get from the 4 lead. They won't get the chest leads, which would be a nice prompt that they need to hook up more leads before they're going to see the rest of the picture. All right, let's see.
So is there an entitled cable as well that they'd have to hook up?
Yeah, and so
Is there, okay.
so what we pack in ours is we have both the ET tube and cannulas in every one of our bags, and students are expected to hook them up. So again, the whole system is the iPads and the router. Everything else is a prop.
Yeah.
So you can add whatever props you want that match what your students use, that change up the cables, the devices, whatever. They don't see anything until you give it to them on the screen, and you control, how and when that happens. Which is part of what's so cool about it, because it is so real time and so tied to their performance, whether or not they do it in order to get it.
Stick them in a pocket?
So this, inside the little side pouches, they got little Velcro things. So that one's Velcroed in. This one I've got a knot tied in it so the tube doesn't fall out. So they've got a couple little Velcro keepers here and there just to do. What I haven't figured out a great way for is if you're going to do defib pads, that's the electrode one, defib's in the other. But when you pull out the pads, what we do in ours is we've got we use the generic training pads, and the cable that I've got, which somebody took out of my bag. So I've got a 4-lead cable and then the 12-lead to hook into it. And, I tell you, it's hard to get good help. I'm missing the cables. So normally I have just one of the generic cables. The problem is if you use the defib pads, when you take them out of the package, you gotta have something to plug into. So you need to have that little extension piece for them to plug into, even if the end of it's just tied to the bag. But then they end up kind of fumbling around in the bag to find the end of it to plug into, which you can see I obviously didn't tie it in well because it's gone.
Are you using the actual cables from the monitors that they're displaying? Do you change the cables per the monitor?
I haven't gone to that extent. I'm just using, what we're using now is the ones they sent me. What I used in our first generation, because what they sent me was a 3-lead, I scavenged old LifePak 12 cables, since at that time that's what everybody was using in our area, and I just put a set of those in there. But you absolutely could do that, is pull a set of those old cables, especially if you got any extras of those, put one in every kit, and that way, again, it's totally familiar, because these cables that they send with them don't look like either a Zoll or a LifePak cable. I don't know if that's more similar to the Philips, but similar in that you've got your leads, and then if you want to plug in the rest of the 12 lead, you got to plug it into the little add-on thing. So it doesn't take our students long to figure that out, but like for CE classes where you're working with people who use these things all the time, one little thing that makes it seem less real just kind of gets in the way. So if it's the exact same cables, that would be kind of cool. All right, so let's see. Kind of bouncing all over here. What questions do you have so far?
I was late, can you start from the beginning?
I'll start over.
How much time does it take to create like a scenario and a CAN scenario and put them in there?
It totally depends on how complex you want to make it, right? But it can be incredibly quick if you're not trying to do things. So the way, and I'll just walk you through it here. There's a little menu button. Well, first, hold on a second. I got to stop this scenario. Actually, let me come back to that. Let me show you something. So
Okay.
are we recording now, I wonder?
Yep.
Didn't ask me to record this scenario.
Yeah,
Because when we disconnected,
I
it
deleted
stopped,
it.
I think. Okay, so let me stop this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new scenario. We'll just close out of that. I'm going to start a new scenario real quick. Yeah, we'll just do this one. Okay, so we're starting a new scenario. It appears to be recording. So a couple things that we can do. So as we're going through this scenario and we've added all of our features, we've got everything going in the scenario. We can go through, change patient parameters, do different things. One of the other pieces that it's got is a tool for the facilitator to flag it. So as you're going along, there's a little button that just says flag at the bottom. And what they've done is they've created 3 categories: performance, communication, and teamwork. And there's 6 little toggles here. You can say good or bad, good or poor performance, good or poor communication, good or poor teamwork. I can say good teamwork, and it flags that point in the video with a little thing that says good teamwork. If I want to go in there later and say, okay, well, right about here, I just noticed something I didn't like very much. I'm going to say poor teamwork. I flag it, the scenario continues. If I want, on that flag, there's also a fill-in box. You can do that, pulls up a screen, and you can type a note. I don't like trying to type while someone's doing something, because if I'm writing notes, I'm missing the next 4 things that happened. So I minimize that as much as possible. But you could just put in, you could put O2 and flag. Just a prompt for yourself of, if you notice something you want to come back and mention to them later, you can just do a couple, some kind of quick note there. The other thing that, and that just helps you do that. So at the end of a scenario, I'm going to stop the scenario. It says, are you sure? And if I say yes, stops, blanks out everything, and it takes me to this little scenario review. And what this is across the top, this whole scenario is only 1.5 minutes long, so it's not much. I can scroll across with the little arrow to whatever point I want. Each of the little red dots is one of those flags that I did. Or I can scroll down here to that poor teamwork, and I did that at 53 seconds. So if I hit that, it'll take me to 43 seconds in the video. 10 seconds before I hit the button, it'll jump to that part of the video. There's the thing I noticed, was the hand waving in front. It's showing me the waveforms that were going on at that time. It's showing me the vital signs that were happening at that time, and whatever was going on in the video screen.
And you can hear the audio coming from it.
And you can hear the audio coming. Right now, we don't have anything set up on that to play it back. What I just added at our school this year is I got 2 Apple TVs. Unfortunately, we couldn't project through this VGA thing here, but I've got Apple TVs to go to the projector. So instead of having a group of people try to group around a 9-inch screen like you're all doing right now, we actually can project it up on a big screen for the review where you can see it. And the flagging is cool because then you can go back to that specific point. Or, of course, you can just go to the video anywhere in here you want and just play the thing. And then it'll play through.
Can we just have your computer monitor now?
His monitor will work.
TV's downstairs, we can just rip off the wall. Take one for that.
His monitor would work really well for this. So yeah, you can just play it, and you can either do segments of it or you can play the whole thing to do a review. One other thing that they just added, they keep adding new stuff, it's really cool. One of the things that they added that I have not used yet because it's brand new, but I'm going to try and incorporate this. If you have students running a scenario and other students watching, like for a class participation thing, they have a free app. The image looks almost exactly the same, except it's got little people in the center of the circle, and it's called Reality Engage. It's a free app that you can put on any iOS device, so it's only iPhones or iPads. But it pops up like this. If you're sending, I mentioned earlier, I have to connect. So I tap to connect, I enter my name, and I start, and then it asks me to hook up to something. Searching for a monitor. Oh, because I just killed it, it's not there. But basically, I choose that monitor, I connect to it. Now I've just added this iPad to that same system with the router and the other ones.
So monitor navy or monitor orange or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
It'll find that monitor, you connect to it. Now your students are connected to it, and what it pulls up is that same voting choices I just showed you and a comment field. So you could have 4 students standing in the back or 6 students standing in the back watching the scenario going, oh, good teamwork, poor communication, or I don't like what he did here. They can add comments, and the only place they show up is on your facilitator iPad.
So they're looking at the facilitator screen.
No, they don't see, they're watching the scenario. The only thing they will see here is what you as a facilitator send to them or the little feedback screen. So if the person captured a 12 lead and you want the audience to see the 12 lead, then you hit the little send 12 lead button on the side of the facilitator, and then they all get to look at the 12 lead and decide for themselves whether they agree with their classmates' interpretation.
Okay.
They can vote on the performance while it's going on, and it'll pop up. So back to the debrief part, as we're going through and debriefing, when I look at that log, incoming, I remember those. I had forgotten about those. You guys don't even flinch. You're just so used to it, right?
It's the sacrifice of staying green.
Yeah. So on this log that pulls up with the debriefing, I have down here these little flags that I put in. If I'd had a whole class participating, I would see additional flags with a timestamp with the person's name. So it would say, Corey commented, or Corey said, or whatever. And so what I'm expecting to see is you'll hit certain points in the scenario. When you go to review it, you're going to see 9 flags in a row because every single person watching noticed the same thing. And that's a pretty good flag for you as a debrief. So, okay, at 6 minutes in, all of you saw something you didn't like. Let's talk about that. Hit the button, you jump to that part of the scenario and review
Or
it.
while you're typing your comment,
while
they're
you're-
catching stuff and
Exactly,
flagging it. Okay.
yeah, exactly. So you're not the only one watching, because how often do you get to the end and you let the students do their own debrief as a group, and they're picking up things from each other that you didn't notice or pick up on. This sort of consolidates that because they got a way to sit back and chime in with their observations while it's happening. It also greatly increases the chance that the people who aren't running the scenario are actually paying attention if you have that expectation that they're going to watch and comment. So they haven't even advertised the engage piece of it. And I think it's one of the coolest things that they've added to it. Jenny?
So the next step is to integrate that with FizzDab.
So that was my question.
It's coming.
You have a fourth iPad that is a chart that has the potential to be charting integrated, right?
Correct.
They can be charting.
And every other scenario they practice. They are working closely with FizzDap. I have not heard any predictions on a timeline of when that's going to be. But that is the goal, is to through their partnership with FizzDap, they want to get us to the point that you get done with the scenario, that you put their name in, they've done the stuff, you've got this log, and then somehow it goes from their chart, they load it into their account, and it's in their FizzDap record. What's that? Magic, exactly. It's magic. That's exactly it.
Most of the students who are, if they're observing a scenario in our situation right now, they're charting the FizzDap. So they wouldn't be doing this because they're already logging in like the team lead thing. And
Right, yeah, we do the same thing. You have everybody, okay, you're evaluating the team lead, you're evaluating that team member, kind of assign that review process.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to be able to have this that also charts in there.
Or at a minimum,
And the other thing that's cool about you guys getting these now is with that mindset. Because honestly, our school, your school, we are way ahead of so many places in terms of paying attention to this stuff and actually trying to figure out how to do it well. But that also means we are a valuable source to these guys to figure out how to build this well. And they're still in the process of building this thing. So as you're looking at this, thinking about what would make it the most effective, share that information with Chris, with their developers, route it through me, I'll pass it along, whatever, because they want this thing to be the ultimate EMS training tool out there, and they're incredibly responsive. And so far, they're still a small enough company that they're really responsive, and I'm hoping that they keep that flavor at least as they grow, because they've grown a lot in the last couple years.
is there a way to save the summary of a case?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
if we could send that summary to the student in an email, then they can review all the vital signs and then attach them. And that, rather than, because I think it attaching to FizzDap is a pipe dream. But I think sending
Oh,
that,
there's always a pessimist in every crowd.
but I think sending that scenario.
Corey
Yeah.
coming up with an absolutely unreasonable request.
So.
Yes, yes.
So there's
you know what
new-
I'm saying though? If they
so
could
there's-
send the summary to the student,
so-
and the student
so-
can say, "Oh, these were all my vital signs. Is the
So
heart
this
rate?"
is the
all that.
scenario
Yeah.
review, which is the log, and you can hit a print review button. And my data has been saved. The reports are now available in what they call the training management system. I say, okay, if I go back to the main menu here, there's this little TMS thing up here. And when I go there, I've got the the demos that we did today are all right there. So I've got a couple of them that I just did. And if I pull that up, if I have been using the little scoring, I didn't even show you the scoring thing. So in addition to the flagging, you can create your own checklists on the side where you give them points or yes, no value for doing various skills. So you can build it to look like a skill sheet, and you just go down the side clicking the check boxes as they complete things or scoring them on whatever scale you put in there. You can do it either way. It'll capture it, it'll show you how they did, how many positive votes they got, how many negative votes, all that kind of stuff.
Will those positive and negative votes pop on the timeline?
When it started and finished, I don't remember. So the event log shows when it started, when the camera was turned on, when things were shown, the flags that came up. It's not showing the vital signs here. And this is, I have not done this piece of it at all. I have not even played with exporting it out, so I don't know exactly how that works or what the capabilities of it are. I'm hoping to start working on that part of it this year to figure out a better way.
It's awesome for when we're running scenarios with bigger groups and we don't have people run notes on TV.
Yeah, I mean, because you can gather a lot and you can capture the video. The other thing that you can do from that, and now that I just bailed out of there, I probably can't get back to that scenario. But when I still have the scenario up and I'm open, let's see if it'll take me back to it. No, I don't think it will.
So you can.
So there is, at the bottom, there's also the buttons that gives you at the bottom. So you can load a new scenario, and it just dumps you out of that, and you start over with the next person. If you're not saving anything, you can print it, which dumps it into the file where you can go get it later. So you don't have to print it right then. You're just saying, I'm going to want to print this, so that you now have it to do as a PDF, to airdrop, to do whatever it is you're going to do with it. And then transfer video is the last one. So you can capture the video. The problem I have with the transfer video at the stage this is right now is what I would like. We use a different recorded video system that when they're done, they upload the video. It takes about a minute for the video to upload, and it's saved in a cloud under their name where they can log in and use it. This doesn't do that. They know that I at least want that. There's one of the things they've recognized and gotten feedback is that a cloud-based storage where when you're done, you dump it somewhere where other students can't see it, but that student can go back and review it, or you as an instructor can go back and review it and have access, keep it a log of it, whatever. Taking the whole video with the vital signs, with the waveforms, and have that all saved someplace. You can do that now, but I have to transfer video, and it takes a couple minutes for this thing to transfer it to a format, and then I can tell it what I want to do with it. It takes a little bit more to do that, and then it's on here in a saved video that I can then go airdrop to someone. I keep saying airdrop because if you've got Apple devices, that's the way to transfer it, because otherwise you can use something like Dropbox, but to be on Dropbox you have to hook to the internet. This is hooked up to that router. So at the point I want to transfer it, I have to go to the settings, get off of that router, go to hook to the college router. All of a sudden it's 8 steps and I don't have the time and resources to do that. So that's another one of those pieces that I'm hoping they're gonna
AirDrop's faster anyway.
figure out. It is, it's fast. The challenge is if your students don't all have Apple devices, then you need to have Apple devices available
If
that
we
you can
just
dump
had
it
We
to.
have iPads.
Yeah, we have the iPads, but if we
Yeah.
just had a single TV in the classroom, and Doug's running a scenario with one of us, and he says, I want to show you guys this one piece. You can airdrop and go to that 10 seconds before and say, what goes on right here? Because this 9
Exactly.
students flagged this. Let's take a look at what happened.
And if you're not too far away with an Apple TV, you'll have to get an HDMI input into something, but if you've got an Apple TV hooked up and you're not running the scenario far from the room, you can have it live streaming the video with the vital signs and parameters to students that aren't in the same room as the scenario. So they could be our new classroom design. We've got scenarios that are adjacent to our classroom, and that was intentional because I can have 3 students in a scenario room running the call while everybody else is sitting out there watching it on the big screen and critiquing it, doing the voting, all that stuff without trying to cram everybody into the space where we're doing the scenario. So yeah, there's lots of options either at the time or as a review. if the Apple TV's in the classroom down the hallway and you're outside running the scenario, you get done, okay, everybody go in here, we're gonna debrief, pop it on the screen, and you've got the review.
It sounds like
So-
this is the way paramedic testing's gonna go.
We're all using these now.
I mean, for the state testing.
Yeah, and I'm trying to convince the state EMS office that they need to buy a set of these so that, and you giggle. You think I'm going for the commission. You just know how likely it is that they're gonna spend any money. But they should have at least a half a dozen of these to take to every test. Because like at our test we just hosted, we had one of these at every integrated station because we have 5 of them. And in all the cardiac stations, we had a hodgepodge of Zols or life packs and crappy rhythm generators that don't work consistently and, you know, just... Oh, is that where that came from? Sorry, dude. I'm glad you're finally upgrading. Welcome to the 21st century. Yeah, you know, I mean, you guys have all played with them. They're just really limited tools. And if this becomes the standard where you can duplicate it, I love it for testing because when we do testing using this, the student comes in, you say, what monitor are you familiar with? Cool, you get to test on a monitor you know. I'm not here to test you on a monitor you've never played with. I'm here to see if you know how to run a call. You know, that's so much more fair and legitimate than tripping people up with equipment they're not familiar with.
Do these have the most basic, you can do an AED CPR class on them?
They do. So I have to...
We can use it for basics, but we can also teach CPR, just your CPR for BLS provider.
Okay.
Did you break it?
Apparently,
I did see
Hold
an
on.
AED on
They
there.
get overwhelmed.
I did too, I'm just kind of curious how.
like I said, these actually don't glitch very often when you
At
do
all.
reasonable things in a reasonable order. When I start jumping all over the place, I sort of overload them.
There it is.
Okay, so we'll do this start. So let me start a scenario, and now I can pick. So we could do with that generic AED. And, you know, the one thing I don't like about this one, and I don't know if we wrote this one down before, is it starts up assuming you've already connected the pads. And so it goes straight to analyze mode as soon as it fires up, which...
Stand clear. Analyzing now.
Yeah,
Stand clear.
and it needs to power up, tell them to
No
connect the
shot
pads,
advised.
then come around to that. It doesn't. I'm not sure
Start
why, and I don't know.
signal.
It looks like it's supposed to be a life pack. What is that, 300, 500? I don't know. Or maybe that's just a generic one. And then, let's see. I think there's more than one AED. What is that? Yeah, so there's a different one. I'm not sure whose that is. So, what's that?
Looks like similar to Philips, but it says I simulate training.
Yeah, they all say I simulate on them, despite even with the brands. So some of them are kind of generic.
Yeah, but turn that one on.
But anyway,
Brand
there
name.
are a few to pick from, and of course, if you're using a life pack, you can also kick it into the analyze mode, and it just wait till it turns on.
Analyzing now. Stand clear.
Yeah.
Analyzing now.
You know, so you can put it into AED mode and run it that way. So there's a few options for how you can do it for BLS classes, CPR classes, that kind of stuff. Let's see, what didn't I go over? All right, so a couple of things actually that I just remember. I'm looking at the control pad here. So in terms of, you asked about making scenarios. What time is it anyway? Okay. The way you create scenarios is pretty simple. So I'm going to go in here, I go to the main menu and I say new scenario. Starts with just kind of a blank generic one. For whatever reason, it starts with everything visible, which the first thing I usually do is turn everything off. But at the very top, there's a